Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. This video is about scriptable objects, but you probably already knew that. Anyway, let's get right into it. Now, what is a scriptable object? If I go to Asset, right click, go to Create, I'll see this player thing here. Probably if you do the same, if you right click on Assets, go on to Create, you won't be able to see that player there. And the reason for that is because I created that. It's not there by default. And that's what a scriptable object is. When I create this player, if I click on it, it won't have anything, and because we haven't created it yet. But here, our player instance, or our player scriptable object, will have different attributes, whatever we want to pass to it. Like it could have name, it could have level, it could have damage, whatever, right? Now let me delete that. And let's create that. Now go to script, go and add a new script, and I already have created mine. So just go on create C# script and name it whatever you want. Now here, if we come here, that's what you should see, but you also see the start and update methods, which I already deleted. But what you see here is basically a scriptable object is a template that basically stores information within it, right? It stores information about the name, about the level, about the damage of the character, or whatever you want it to have. So there's one minor difference when you are creating a scriptable object script, and first it is that you are not assigning scriptable object script to any object here, because what we were writing before in the previous videos, we were assigning it to some value. We were either assigning our script to a button, so we can either move it to upwards and downwards and whatever, but scriptable objects should not be embedded within a game object in the hierarchy. And if you're not writing a scriptable object script, I forgot to actually tell you that, but every time your scripts should be embedded within a project, within a game object in the hierarchy, almost every time, right? And this is because it has this mono behavior inheritance here. Don't worry about the inheritance terminology, we won't care about that now, but basically this mono behavior means just stick it somewhere. It's the base class from which every Unity script derives, right? And that's why I said almost every time you need to embed a script within a game object. Anyway, now let's remove that, because again, we are not writing a normal script, we are writing a script that is a scriptable object, and here we're saying scriptable object, right? And basically what we're saying with this syntax, don't worry about the syntax and how it is actually accomplishing whatever it is doing, but what you need to understand now is that it is inheriting from scriptable object, meaning this whole thing is a scriptable object, a class that you can derive from it. Basically we are deriving from the scriptable object, right? So we are taking whatever functionality that this provides us with that has already been written. Now, probably you're wondering now, but how do I right click, go and create and add this player, right? We don't see it now because I saved that file, and that was the file that was actually generating this whole functionality here. Well, actually it is really simple. What we're saying is we go to assets, right click and go on to create, and this is basically our asset menu, right? That's how it's called. So what we're saying is we have the syntax, the brackets, and within them we're saying create asset menu, and again this is the asset menu. However, inside, right, we open parentheses here, and within these parentheses what we're saying is menu name, right? Because again all of these are different menus. So basically we're saying we want to create a new menu in here, and we want to give it a name, right? So let's say we want to give it player. That makes sense, right? Now if we save that file, Control S, go here, go to assets, let it compile, and go to create, and you see this player. There we go. We just created our own menu here, right? That's the name. But that's pretty much it we've done so far. When we click on player and we create it, and let's say this would be called Jeff, and Jeff is pretty much nothing, right? It's just a scriptable object that doesn't contain any information. So what good does it do to us, right? So we want to a little bit expand on that. So when we come into our class here, what do we want our player to have, right? Let's say we wanted to have a name. Actually, just name, whatever. Name, level, and what else? We wanted to have a race. There we go. Now, this is actually pretty simple. We could do it a couple of ways, but I'm going to use the serialized field way, right? Because we already covered this in the previous video. So we're saying serialized field, and then we're saying string name, because we want our name to contain a string within it, right? Then we're saying serialized field int level, because our level will be a whole number, right? Then serialized field, and our race, we want it to be a string race, right? There we go. So far we have created that now, and if we save that, go back to Unity, it's compiling right now. Yep, there we go. Go to create a player. You see that it has a name, a level, and a race. And let's name our player again Jeff. And actually, some really cool thing that Unity does is it capitalizes the fields here, because we have it as name, level, and race, not capitalized, but here it's capitalized. So it's just a cool feature that Unity provides us with. And okay, we've got that. Now let's populate it, right? We already covered serialized field, but just a reminder, serialized field is basically adding a field to a component, right? So basically this acts here as a component in our case, and we're just adding fields to that component. So we have name, which will be Jeff, level will be 10, and it will be a human, right? Simple as that. So now what we've got is, let me open Paint, right? So what we've got is a container. There we go, that's a container, which is called Jeff, and Jeff has name, level, and what else has it got? It's got the race, yeah, it's got race, but nothing else. So as you can see, it basically contains data, right? It contains data but nothing else. So we kind of want to use that data, right? So when we come here now, alright, let's append this. So basically what we can do is go here, create an empty game object. I would just say player. For now this won't have any functionality at all. This is just me showing you how you can actually use scriptable objects in terms of creating them and appending it to a game object, what we'll do right now. We won't do any functionality for now, but we will do in the future videos. But here, let's say we add a component, right? We add a component and we want to add a new script. So let's add a new script and let's just call it player container. And I already had it defined here, pre-written, because I wrote that before this video. So you know, you can give it whatever name you want to give it, right? This is the script that we're adding it. So we want to create it and add it as a component to that player object that we've created. Go and create and add. Now, as I said in the beginning of this video, every time, apart from making a scriptable object script, whatever your script is, you add it, you append it to a game object in your hierarchy system, right? So what we did here is just we appended the script to the game object, right? Now let's reload though, and now if we go to our, where is it? Is it in Yeah, so let's open that script. Let's delete that, we won't need it. And right now, what do we want to pass to this player game object in our hierarchy? Well, we basically want to pass it a player. And again, we already did that in a previous video, but we want to be able to drag and drop this scriptable object to this player here, and this player here needs to have a field, right? Needs to have a field that will be accepting data of type player. And what is of type player? Well, you guessed it, this is of type player. So how do we do that? Well, it's pretty simple. We just have serialized field. Oh, and by the way, as you can see here, we're having mono behavior, and this script is attached to that game object, right? So serialized field, and we want a player, right? This is a player, so we want a player to be able to drop a player instance, right? So we say player, let's say player 1. Now if I control S that, so we save that, let it compile. Here now in a second we are seeing this player 1 here, right? So now as you can see, it accepts player. Now let me append that. There we go. Now we just added a player object to this game object, right? This is a scriptable object, this is a game object. But really what our player has so far is just empty. Actually it's not empty because we actually added the values here, but it just has data. It doesn't have any functionality whatsoever. So what we could do is, if we go to player container and let's say void start, let's create the method that was already written for us, and let's say debug log, and let's say player1.name. Now what this should give us is, it goes to this player object because that's how we reference it, player1, and it goes to there and it should give us Jeff because that's the name. If you go to our player, you see name here, right? So it should give us name, whatever is stored under name. So now this should give us back Jeff. Now control S that, and now when we run our game, we should see Jeff again printed in the console. Now let's run that, and there we go. We are basically seeing Jeff. And let me close that. Oops, not collapse, but so again, how did we get Jeff? So we have player, which is essentially a template that contains this data. Then having this line here, which allows us to create a new asset, we go here, go to player, and then we gave it a name, a level, and a race, right? So let's give this Mike. There we go. And then here we say Mike, not Nike. Then let's say we have this will have first level embedded in it, and then we have race, which will be, let's say, orc. And there we go. Now Mike here is an orc which is first level. It just started playing this game and has a name Mike. Now if we pass this Mike here instead of Jeff, what do you think should be printed to the console when I run this game? If you said Mike, then you would be correct, because again we are creating this object via here, create player. This player stores all of these, which is name, level, race, and each of these is independent, meaning this will contain whatever has been stored here, this will contain whatever has been stored here. Then we are going to our player container, which is mono behavior, which means it has been embedded in a game object, which is player, right? We embedded it here as a component. Then we added a field here by saying serialized field. We added this as a field under that game component, which is player container, which is our script basically. There we go. We have added that as a field, and what we said is when this starts, right? When the game starts, just print the name of that player. And what's the name again? The name is whatever has been stored here. And this is capitalized. this is not. That's how Unity basically does it, right? So right, what we could do now is go to player. Now let's add a really simple functionality of it, right? Now let's say it will have a public method, because we want to be able to access this method outside that class, meaning we want to access it here. So what we want to say here is say player1 dot, and okay, what do we want to do? Well, we want to set the damage. That will be one functionality that we will have. We are going to write it in a second. And we also want to say player1 print stats. That's all we want to do for now. Now, if we go to player, let's create these methods, right? So that will be set damage. Now, this will be void because we won't be returning anything, but rather we are actually setting something, meaning we won't be returning anything. That's why it's void. And now it would make sense if we have here damage, but we wouldn't want the player to be able to set that damage. That's why we're not making it serialized here, right? We're not serializing this field. So it would make sense that each player, the damage will depend upon the level, right? So let's say that we'll say damage, right, will be equal to level multiplied by 10. So let's say this Jeff here, this object, the scriptable object, the level is 10, so the damage that Jeff is gonna have is 100. Now let's go to Mike, and Mike is unfortunately just first level, he's a beginner, so he would have damage of 10 because we're multiplying whatever the level is, either 1 or 10, we're multiplying it by 10, and that's what the damage of this object will be. That's all we will be writing for the set damage. Now the next thing is print stats, right? Let's write that. And since we are going to be printing, we are not going to be returning anything back to the user. We're just going to be taking void as a return type of this function. So we'll say print stats. There we go. What do we want? Oh, oops, no, return. We'll say debug.log. We'll say name, and let's make it a bit nicer. So we'll say this player has this player's name is, right, and we'll have name. There we go, that's one line. Then let's print something else. Let's print every single piece of information we can extract. So this player's level is level, right? We're accessing these variables that are being set here again, right? Then we say race, and then race. So this player's race level, but what we can also print is the damage, right? So this player's damage, which we are setting here. So this method needs to be called after we have set the damage to be equal to something, because if that's not the case, if we're not calling this print stats after the damage has been set, then it will return nothing because it's nothing has been stored there. So in order to prevent some errors, like giving us no or something, let's just give it a default value of 0. So you know, if we code, you know, print stats before setting the damage, right, we don't want the compiler to return us an error that this hasn't been initialized or whatever, right? This has been returning 0 because it hasn't been initialized to anything, right? So let's just make it a default value of 0 if we do some mistake like this, right? If we make some mistake like this. And now we're just going to print the damage. So now what we can say is we have written this small piece of functionality in our player. So now this does not only contain data, but also it contains methods, right? It contains methods, meaning it manipulates within itself the data that it has via different calls, right? So we're saying player1 set the damage and then print the stats. Now let's save that. Let's save that as well. Go to our Unity, and we got our error here. What's the error? Player inherited member object name. Use the new keyword if hiding was intended. Player name hides inherited member object name. Use the new keyword if it was intended. Okay, for now, let's not worry about that. And I think okay, let's not worry about that now. I think this is already a keyword in Unity. That's why it is giving us an error. So let's just it's giving us a warning. So let's just make it name1, right? Just so we don't have any issues with using keywords that have been embedded already in the technology that we're using, which is Unity, right? Now let's just have it set as name1, and there we go. Let's save that, and since we changed that to name1, let's come to our assets. Let's compile, and now, as you can see in our scriptable object, this changed from name to name1, and the values now are unset. So let's set them, right? Because again, we changed that variable name. So Jeff and Mike, I don't know where I clicked, but whatever. Assets, there we go. And then we go to player. We have passed Mike. Now pause the video and try to figure out what do you think will be printed to the screen after I just click on play game, right? Now pause the video and come back for the answer, and don't worry if you don't get it, but just try to work out what is actually going to be printed based on what we have written so far, right? Now let's run it. Let's click on play and go here. There we go. Now what are we seeing? This player's name is Mike, this player's level is 1, this player's race is orc, and this player's damage is 10. How did we get that information? Well, if we go to our project, go to assets, go to Mike, we'll see Mike 1 orc, Mike 1 orc, and 10. How did we get 10? Because we are setting the damage here, which we're multiplying the level by 10. And what's the level? Well, it's 1. Hence, it's giving us back 10, right? And because we are using these methods here, which we wrote in our player class here, right? So it's having this method, which is this player's name is, right? This player's name is, this player's level is, this player's level is, and you get the point. We're just using that method here to just display some information. So that really is scriptable objects, right? Essentially what they offer us is a bunch of data stored in them, bunch of methods, if you will, if you want, actually, stored in them that will be manipulating the values that we have set here, which is name, level, race, or whatever, right? You can add whatever properties or whatever characteristics of an object that you want, right? So they're kind of communicating with each other, right? Because if you go back here, this is setting a value, but it's also using a value. It's using the level. So it's safe to say that methods are using values, but also methods are setting values. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So for now, again, we won't be using these scriptable objects, and again, I just wanted to show you how they are created, how you can pass them, what's the difference between mono behavior and scriptable object, right? Again, when it's scriptable object, we just take some stuff from it. For example, create asset menu has been already written. We can use that because we see the scriptable object, because we have deriving from it. If we said mono behavior, now this wouldn't work, right? We need scriptable object in order for this to work correctly and as we want it to work. And yeah, I mean, that's it, guys, for today's video. I hope you found it informative and helpful, and possibly I would advise you to create your own scriptable object. Try to give it whatever characteristics you want. Try to give it some functionality, like some methods that are communicating with that data, and in the end, just try to pass it in a game object, right? Just make your own stuff. That's what I'm advising you to do, and that's the main takeaway from this video. And again, thank you guys for watching, and see you on the next video. And again, stay hyped, because in some when we pass the next couple of videos, we will start creating our first game. So see you guys in the next video.